Should be working now. And playing your favorite scenario.
What?
Starts with P. I felt load size. I need to. That was horrible.
Holy fucking shit, dude. Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
What makes a really good horror
Yeah.
game?
I slept way
That is
too
a question
fucking
I've been
much.
asking myself lately. Is it a game with a good story and characters? Maybe it's the sound design, the atmosphere, music, and well-timed out jump scares. Or maybe it's the pacing,
I
the
think I
tension
slept
build-up,
16 hours.
and immersive gameplay.
Ew.
Maybe. But for me, it's not any one of those things. In fact, I think the
Today
best
wasn't a
horror
good
games
day.
aren't even necessarily the scariest. Rather, it's the ones that stick with you. The ones that make you think and reflect, that affect how you see the world around you. The ones that leave a mark on you. A mark that stays well long after you finish playing the actual game. And the only type of horror that can do that for me is the psychological type. I think the reason why psychological horror is so effective is because
what are you
this
guys
type
up
of
to?
horror explores themes that we are all familiar with.
PGTI.
Themes of
Just
isolation,
chilling.
regret,
PGTI.
and trauma. Because unlike monsters or psychotic killers, these things we have to actually live with every day. And unlike the other horrors that may or may not exist in our real world, these things do exist. And they exist within us. And that's more terrifying than anything the real world can throw at you. Having to confront whatever dark, suppressed horrors lay in the corners of our unconscious minds.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Are you
In
streaming?
Silent Hill 2,
Yeah.
James Sunderland receives a letter from his wife Mary,
On Twitch,
calling
I
him to
assume.
come join her at a small
No,
town,
YouTube.
a town by the name of Silent Hill.
I see.
The only issue is, James had killed his wife 3 years ago.
When you send notifications on the depressed live, it disappears immediately.
Now he
Doesn't
finds
stay.
himself at a strange, empty, fog-riddled town.
Yeah, it's 'cause it's
YouTube one's
YouTube.
not on there.
And throughout the rest of the game, we follow
Or you
and watch
post
as
it.
a tormented man descends into pure madness, as the reality around him slowly crumbles into a living hell. James questions himself. He questions why he came here looking for her. He knows she's dead, he's certain of it. Yet, here he is, here, in Silent Hill, looking for her. Turns out it wasn't so much his wife that's called
The
for
bot
him,
only
But
works
but
for
the town of Silent Hill itself. This innocuous small rural town holds a secret,
Yay.
an ancient mysterious force that draws in people who have something that's unresolved psychologically. And once these people find their way to it, the
Posted
town
somewhere
morphs
then.
itself
Yeah,
into
damn.
a personalized experience that reflects whatever a person needs to confront within themselves. It drew in James with the letter from his dead wife because he needed to confront the guilt from the fact that he took her life. This concept of exploring the human psyche like this fascinates me. And that's just one example of what psychological horror can do when done right. Today I want to explore two games that I've played recently that have gotten me to think about this just as much as those Silent Hill games did at one time. Two titles created by one person, Afraid of Monsters and Cry of Fear. But before we do that, you know what really horrified me recently? It's when I discovered just how much personal information is accessible online with just a Google search of a name or email address. That same information is collected by data brokers from websites we visit and is sold to the highest bidder. And those same sensitive details are at risk due to frequent data breaches. A recent data breach at Unified Healthcare affected potentially a third of US citizens, compromising their personal health information. This is why this video is sponsored by Aura. Aura offers a robust solution for protecting your identity, finances, and personal info online. Its comprehensive service is not only easy to set up, but covers all bases in one place. Aura actively searches for and removes your personal Afraid of Monsters is a psychological horror Half-Life 1 mod released in 2005. It follows a character named David Leatherhoff, who is in a hospital bathroom staring at himself in a mirror. I really need to take these pills. I can't stop taking them. Damn it. Unable to control his urges, David takes the pills. Huh? Where am I? We awaken a pitch-black environment illuminated by white lines showing us the path. Coming around a corner, down a path that resembles a prison, then right to find a small shed.
When did I sell this garbage ass score?
Waking up from
2021.
this hallucination, we find the mirror broken. Did we do this? Damn, I must have passed out. Making it out of the hospital, we find that the hospital has changed. The lights are out and it seems abandoned now. Strange. What happened to this place? Exploring the area further, we find a knife in the bathroom of one of the patient's rooms. There's blood everywhere. We can use the knife to break things and access new areas that were blocked off to us before. Making it out of the main doors, we find the hallways of the hospital. Reaching the bottom levels, we find a flashlight in one of the rooms. Exploring the hospital further, the game slowly builds up in intensity as we explore one destroyed room after another. We find bloodied up hospital beds. And the feeling creeps up on us that something must have went terribly wrong. Making it around this corner, we find a bed with what seems like a covered corpse. But when we turn our backs to it, we might not be completely alone here. Well, with our paths being blocked, the only way out we can find is through a window. We parkour our way around the side of the building, climbing on some scaffolding, and making it to another window that lets us access a new area. We find a path that leads to the left, but it's blocked off.
My
The
aim
lights
is
seem to
erratic
have fallen
and also
down,
no-
electrifying our path and enabling us to pass underneath it. We find a note on the floor. Dear janitor, I have a problem with some lights. Could you please turn off the electricity for a short while so I can fix it? Our first objective, turn the power off. Exploring the rest of the top level, we find a gun on a table. Suddenly feeling much safer now. We reach a personnel-only section of the building, with the power generators. We turn the power off, turning off the current from the broken lights and allowing us to pass under. But this also means that we'll have to make the track back in complete darkness, with our only source of illumination, our flashlight. This is where the game actually begins, and right as we make it out, we encounter our first enemy, a Twitcher. Twitchers are zombie-like enemies, and outside of their grunts, they are completely silent when they walk. They can break out of almost anything to jump you and have these really disturbing twitching heads. They can also get really fast and can be dangerous in numbers, quickly blocking your path and cornering. We're gonna be dealing with a lot of these throughout our journey. Making it back to the hallway with the broken lights, we can finally pass under. We make it into a room with a button on a table and writing on the wall that reads, each color/button for each door. This is a hint. Pressing a button opens a door at the original level we started at, enabling us to take a ladder down a really sketchy shaft, which lets us reach another area. We eventually reach a level with an accessible elevator opening. Jumping down the elevator, we find more pill bottles from earlier. These pills act as the primary source of health for the player. They can be easily found in abundance throughout the game. All we know is that they are painkillers and that our main character really needs to take them. The game makes it pretty obvious that David is addicted to this medication. causing him to be dependent on them story-wise, but also in-game as the primary source of health. While the game gives us very little to go off of plot-wise, we can find some information in the game's wiki. David Leatherhoff is the protagonist of Afraid of Monsters. He is a mentally ill man who is addicted to a mysterious painkiller being mailed to him by an unknown company. After receiving bottle after bottle of an unknown drug from an anonymous source, David decides to seek help at a local hospital. After wandering into the bathroom, David finds yet another bottle of the drug before him. Unable to control himself, he takes the pills. Soon after, he passes out and delves into a nightmare. Sometime later, David awakens to a now abandoned hospital late at night. Okay, this gives us a little bit more info about who David is and why he found himself in this situation. But this also raises some questions. Who is shipping him these pills? And why do they give him hallucinations every time David takes them? Back at the elevator, we break through the broken floor, taking a ladder down and entering an opened ventilation shaft, where we encounter a new enemy called the hand crab, a rotting head with a hand emerging from its mouth. If you didn't notice, the hand crab is a modification of the head crab, an enemy from the original Half-Life. And in fact, all the enemies in Afraid of Monsters are essentially just reskins and remodels of the base enemies from Half-Life 1. Except for the Twitchers, which are a modification of the zombies from the Half-Life 1 mod, They Hunger. They have been slightly modified, given a sped-up animation and fast-twitching heads. The good news is, we're almost out of the hospital. Making it down to the garage, from here we reach a basement area, which gives us access to a back door that lets us outside. For the rest of the game, we go through a multitude of environments.
What did you say?
First through the city,
What are you listening to?
then through the sewers,
Fuck knows. A YouTube video.
the subways, which take us to a new section of the city, where we then go through apartments until we find a large garage with a working vehicle. David gets in, finally able to escape this hellhole of a city, and drives off into the night. An undisclosed amount of time later, David reawakens again. Having swerved off the road onto a tree, we find ourselves in the middle of nowhere. This forest area makes up the majority of the late game, filled to the brim with monsters and entities that we'll have to battle through. The darkness and the dense trees make it really hard to see what's in front and where we're supposed to go. We eventually find a cemetery. Next to it, a small shed. Inside there are stairs that take us down to the basement, which has a door that brings us to a hidden mansion. This hidden mansion has a secret entrance, hidden in its chimney. Once we're able to open it and go through, we reach the final level of the game, a level called Heaven. But it sure as hell doesn't look like a heaven to me. Eventually reaching the final boss battle. After defeating all the enemies and escaping in time, the game ends, and we get the first ending of Afraid of Monsters. David wakes up in a strange house. Disorientated and confused, he hears the sounds of police sirens outside. When he looks around him, David sees multiple dead bodies laying on the floor. He exits the house and surrenders himself to the police. In the second ending, David is being interrogated by a detective. Unable to recall much of what had happened, David looks physically distressed. And in the third ending, a prison guard is sitting reading a newspaper with the headlines, "Psychotic Killer Claims Over 27 Victims." The guard gets up, walks down the hallway, opens the sliding window shaft of David's cell to find the final plot twist of Afraid of Monsters is that the entire game has been one long psychotic episode, caused due to an overdose of the painkiller medication David took in a hospital bathroom. Our entire journey through the hospital, the city, and the rest of the areas wasn't us fighting monsters, but instead it was a drug-induced psychotic rampage that cost the lives of 27 victims. Unable to deal with the guilt, David decides to end it all. It's a pretty gruesome and depressing way to end the game. Afraid of Monsters actually has a fourth and secret ending that you wouldn't see unless you play through all 3 different endings and were paying real close attention throughout the entire playthrough. See, through all different ending routes, we can come across these pieces of paper with numbers and letters on them. If we actually kept a record of all these letters, we can actually find a secret room in the heaven level, which has numbers all over it. Solving the puzzle using these codes unlocks a door, which takes us to a level that resembles the same hospital we started the game at, but the entire level begins to twist and turn. Eventually, it spits us out onto an apartment building, where we come face to face with another David. David has to fight this version of himself, an entity known solely as the addiction. After beating the boss, the game cuts one last time. David is laying on a hospital bed surrounded by doctors. The sound of his heart monitor flatlining can be heard as the doctors discuss his apparent overdose. Miraculously though, after a few moments, David's heart monitor begins beeping again. He is alive. And the entire game has been nothing but a nightmare in David's mind. Afraid of Monsters is a Half-Life 1 horror mod following a drug addict through a psychotic episode that turns into a drug-induced rampage, where the enemies and the monsters that we thoughtlessly kill throughout the entire game turn out to be the innocent people that David comes across. First to the hospital, then the city, and finishing off in a countryside, all while the entire time the police are after us, finally catching up with us in one of the homes in the middle of the forest. David wakes up in the final moments before his arrest to find himself surrounded by dead bodies. Confused, he hands himself in, only to find out later while being interrogated what he truly did. Unable to live with his actions, David decides to end it all. David is our unreliable narrator, whose inability to distinguish reality from hallucinations has created this entire apocalyptic environment we've been playing through. The fact that the game forced us to keep taking the pills to regen our health might have been David's hallucinations in his mind that he needs to keep taking them or else he dies. But what I haven't told you yet, perhaps the most impressive part about this, was that this entire mod that we've just played through was created by a 12-year-old. Andreas Ronberg started working on this mod at the age of 12 and released it 2 years later at the age of 14. In a devlog series uploaded by Andreas, also known as Rumpel, titled The Making of Afraid of Monsters, he recalls that Afraid of Monsters started off as just him playing around with the modding tools of Half-Life 1, trying to make a horror mod. This initial version was titled All the Ugly Monsters. It was only once he realized that he had created something with the potential to be great that he decided to finish the project and release it as Afraid of Monsters. A mod that would see great success for being so ahead of its time, and for its time, Afraid of Monsters was really impressive. But what this video is really about is of what Rumpel would make after Afraid of Monsters. See, Andreas would release Afraid of Monsters in 2005. 2 years after, he would form a small group with 3 other passionate modders and developers titled Team Siceclar, and they would work on a definitive edition for Afraid of Monsters, releasing that in 2007 under the name of Afraid of Monsters: The Director's Cut. An all-around improved version of the original with new enemies, models, maps, etc. But the team's magnum opus would come another 5 years after that. Another mod project for Half-Life 1 that was somewhat of a spiritual successor in terms of themes and overall vision. A mod that would be everything that Afraid of Monsters tried to be, but better. And this mod would be called Cry of Fear.
I've always felt alone. My whole life. For as long as I can remember. I don't know if I like it, or if I'm just used to it. But I do know this. Being lonely does things to you. Feeling shit, bitter and angry all the time just eats away at you.
The game begins with our main character, Simon, on his commute back home from school. On a cold winter night, Simon's routine is abrupted by the cries of help.
Help me. Somebody. Oh, shit.
An old man had fallen down on the floor.
What happened?
Simon is caught off guard, but runs to help the old man anyways. Simon wakes up in a dark alley.
Where am I?
Confused by where he is or how he got here.
How did I get here?
He receives a text message on his phone, but it's out of data again. And the game drops us off from here on out, lost in a city with our only path going forward. And from the very start, the atmosphere can be felt immediately. Entering a tunnel, we see a figure moving in the corner of our eyes. Once we chase it down, we find only blood trails leading to a metal door. It's locked. Leaving the tunnel, we make it out to another back alley. This one is even more decrepit, and Simon is starting to see some hallucinations. We go down the stairs and through a door leading to a maintenance area. It's dark here, which prompts the game to let us know that we can use our trusty phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. In this game, we have a real inventory system, something that was completely missing in Afraid of Monsters. This system is very reminiscent of classic survival horror games, allowing us to equip different tools and weapons, but at the limit of only 6 slots. This is Simon's phone. It's a Sony Ericsson W610i, and it's arguably the most useful tool we have on us. Not only is the phone used throughout the game as a tool to progress the story, but it is also our only source of light, for now. The good news is, unlike Afraid of Monsters, the phone's battery won't run out, at least not anytime soon, which means that's one extra thing we won't have to worry about. And it seems like the message we got at the beginning was from our mother, worried about us. She asks us to come home before dark, but I think it's a little bit too late for that. One really cool thing about Cry of Fear is the ability to dual wield any 2 items that we have in our equipable slots, allowing us to use our weapons without losing the light. Coming out of the tunnel, we find narrow city streets that lead us to a main square area, which is also eerily quiet. One building here has its door open. Curious, we make our way inside to find an ordinary restaurant, but in the back room, we find a computer. It's password locked. Damn. When exploring the city square, we find some pieces of paper on the floor, one of them reading Jill and David, and the other, confused user. Entering these back at the computer unlocks the device, giving us a code. But right as that happens, Simon hears someone making their way inside this building. We find someone peeking through the windows. If we try to follow him, however, well, now that we know the code, there's no need for us to stay here any longer. We make the track back to that locked door. Another useful feature that this game has is the notepad. Throughout the game, Simon will take notes of important pieces of information that the player might need to remember on his notepad. In this case, Simon wrote down a code to unlock the padlock. Entering the door leads us to another dark hallway, which emerges into another back alley, before we see him again.
What the?
Whoever this person is, they are leading us somewhere. But the question emerges, who are they? And how do they know our phone number? Entering the door leads us to more dark hallways where we find an old tape recorder. Simon comments that he can use these to record his thoughts and experiences. These tape recorders can be found throughout the game and are this game's version of a save point. Continuing down the path, Simon comes face to face with something otherworldly. This is the first enemy we come across in the game, and it is known as a slower. Slowers are this game's version of the Twitchers, making them the most common enemy we'll come across. They are zombie-like creatures and come in a wide variety. We also find a syringe on the floor. These are morphine syringes, a medication used mainly for pain relief. They are this game's version of a health pack, and regen both health and stamina at the same time. When we pick it up for the first time, the game tells us a syringe containing 1 dose of morphine restores health, but too much can be dangerous. When using this item, Simon actually pulls back his sleeve and injects himself, exposing the cut marks on Simon's wrists. The fact that Simon doesn't even question injecting himself with this random syringe perhaps hints at a familiarity that Simon has with this drug. All he says is, "Looks like morphine. This is strong stuff, so I'd better be careful with it." Unlike in Afraid of Monsters though, it is unclear if Simon is an addict or not. The game cleverly uses subtle clues and environmental storytelling like this to reveal more about the world and our characters. We already know from the intro monologue that Simon is a deeply lonely individual, dealing with a lot of pent-up emotions and mental turmoil, anger, bitterness, anxiety, and depression, leading him to engage in self-destructive behaviors as coping mechanisms. After the car accident, Simon's mental reality has seemingly transitioned into the material world, waking up in a dark alley just to find himself alone, in an abandoned, broken-down city, being anxiously stalked by an unknown messenger, and preyed upon now by monsters. That's the Simon we play as. That's the main character of Cry Fear. And if that doesn't tell you enough about what kind of game Cry Fear really is, well, I guess you'll just have to wait and see. We jumped out the manhole, down to a sewer where more slowers are waiting for us. We find a lever which opens a door, taking us back out on the other side. But not before we receive a new text message. Only this time, it's from a different number. "Help me. Please help. They are coming. I'm inside the apartments. Hurry." It seems like someone is in the city with us, in need of help, stuck in the apartment building, giving us a new objective to find a way inside. The good thing is there's some leftover scaffolding we can parkour up, allowing us to access and open the balcony door. We've made it into the apartments. Simon comments how this place gives him a strange feeling. And we receive our next message, which only reads, 4th floor. We find a paper note left on the ground, titled Secret Note Number 1. It's a really creepy note retelling about someone stalking children playing in a park and hinting at a potential kidnapping, all done through some sort of poem. This is our first introduction to the apartment predator, a serial killer and child predator who lived in this building, or potentially still does. By entering the first apartment to the right, we come across our second enemy type in the game, known solely as the children. They're not that much more dangerous than the slowers, except they move faster and wield 2 knives. They appear as rotting corpses of small children, wrapped up by duct tape and black garbage bags. These enemy types can only appear in the apartments, and can't be found anywhere else in the game. They are believed by many to be the victims of the apartment killer, the same victims he writes about on his notes, that have somehow reawakened again, attacking anyone they come in contact with. It's definitely one of the saddest enemy types in the game. Seeing a pathway in the balcony that leads us to the staircase. Going up to level 4, where our messenger is supposed to be, we find the door locked, which means we'll need to find another way around. The only door here that's open is that of level 2. Another note on the floor. This one is even creepier, and talks about how every time the apartment killer goes for the children, their parents always come looking for them, which is why he always has to kill them. Going into the bedroom confirms that this is indeed the serial killer's apartment. We find a syringe and a key on the floor. But the room has been turned into some sort of collage or shrine of sorts for all his victims, with pictures taken of their bodies and crime scenes, titling each one like Collection 11, Collection 04, Tasted Bad, Rotted Too Quickly, and Slowest Death Yet. This is by far one of the darkest and most disturbing parts of the game, and it definitely creeped me out more than any other section. It's a powerful example of environmental storytelling that continues this side narrative of the apartment killer, revealing just how sick and depraved he really was. And the fact that this can be easily missed by players who aren't paying close attention further highlights the level of detail the developers put into this world. It also demonstrates how unafraid the game is of tackling very dark subject matter that many other developers would never dare to explore. The whole point of this part, I believe, is to convey that sometimes the worst monsters are humans, and often those we least suspect, like in this case, a next-door neighbor. Leaving a room, we see a vision of all the victims before we encounter a new enemy, the baby. These enemies run towards the player before their heads explode, exposing a large spike that they try to impale you with. These enemies are also, most likely, more incarnations of the victims of the predator. Leaving this apartment, we check the key that we picked up, and it has a note on it reading, "Neighbor across." Entering the apartment across the hallway, we are ambushed by another zombie child. This apartment, for some reason, has a broken wall, the wall that's connected to the apartment next door. Finding more slowers and child zombies, we eventually make it to a third apartment, where we find something interesting. It seems like there's a decomposing body of someone who is crawling through the plenum space, his hand still holding a gun. Simon reaches for the gun when a key drops from the body. It's the hall key. Finally armed with a weapon, we make it out to the main hallway, which takes us to a secondary staircase with an elevator.
I'm gonna go to sleep.
It seems stuck. Making it up to third level, there's a door here that stands out from the rest. But pay no attention to it now, we'll come back to it later. We find the third letter. This one explains how the serial killer put a code lock on the elevator so that people would have to take the stairs instead, making it easier for him to reach people coming up the stairs. Entering the hall on the bottom level, we find a different elevator that can take us to level 4. Finally, at level 4, we find a 4th note on the floor, this one describing one of his murders. We receive another text message once we reach a door all covered in blood at the end of the hall. All it reads is, "In here." We enter the apartment. We find the apartment serial killer, dead in a pool of his own blood. Simon questions whether he had done this himself or someone else had done this to him. There's also some pills here on the side of the tub. If you couldn't tell, these are actually the exact same pills as the ones David was addicted to and Afraid of Monsters. Perhaps a connection between the two games. Fun fact, years back, a post was made on the Cry of Fear Facebook page about this exact scene. It reads, "One hell of a mess from killing yourself. No wonder, seeing what kind of pills he took. Hint." Confirming that this was indeed self-inflicted, and that it might have been those same pills that caused him to do it.
Hello?
Something to take note of is that the phone number from the person in need of help that guided us here is 460-98372.
You streamer?
And it sent us the first message once we reached the outside
You
of the
very
apartment,
well known?
sending us a text asking for help and saying they are coming.
Why
from
you not
inside
well
the
known?
apartment. While the initial unknown messenger that messaged us
only
looked
play
to the right
Kovaaks.
in the city is a completely
When
different
you
phone number,
well known?
being 460-32-738. While
Never.
we are barely able to make up what the
Have
stalker
you
from the
ever
city looks
worn
like,
wigs?
appearing mostly as just
No.
a shadowy figure, we do catch a
Will
quick
you
glimpse of him
wear
during the
wigs?
scene back at the restaurant. Seeing as he's
When
wearing
will
a
you wear
striped
wigs?
shirt and a
Never,
white mask over his head,
motherfucker.
his model appears more
Fuck
like
you,
the
I
slower
want to see
rather
you in
than
a
the
wig,
serial
beautiful
killer.
man.
But he only guides and stalks us in the city, as in the moment we reach the apartments,
Alright.
we don't see or hear from him again. It's
Came
even
back from
unclear
uni
if the
and
second
man,
unknown messenger was
I'm
the serial killer. If the killer was already
tired.
well dead by the time Simon entered
wake
the
up.
apartment, how could he be messaging and guiding us
Just
the
wake up,
entire
I'm
time?
awake.
He even knew exactly where we were, giving us
tired.
direct directions like 4th floor when we entered the building,
Tired.
or in here when we finally reached the
Super
apartment
tired.
door. So,
But
who are
I
these
have
unknown messengers?
corn.
Are they even real? Or maybe there's something more. If the corpses of the children were able to reincarnate once again, then maybe whoever was asking us for help or guiding us in the city was something close to that. Maybe some sort of vengeful spirit that wanted us to uncover the truth. Or maybe it's all in Simon's head. Simon picks up
The
a key he
shorts I'm
finds
getting
in a
on
tub of
YouTube are
blood.
fucked, man.
It's the basement.
I got a shirt of
On our way
someone
down to the basement,
trying
we
to
encounter
stuff
a new enemy.
a
This
whole
one is called the
pizza
fast.
into like a pizza.
But for some reason,
saving
our
thing.
initial pathway to the stairs
like,
has been blocked
why?
off by metal bars. Tracing our steps
Like,
back
I
to the
don't
main
care.
floor level, we finally reach the basement door. We find the basement flooded with water.
Oh man, my eyes.
After reaching the other end, we unlock a door. And it's within this new area where we encounter a new enemy, the Drowned. This one is different from any other enemy we've encountered so far, being that when a player is exposed to her for too long, she can actually take control of Simon, forcing him to turn the gun onto himself. We have to fight through a couple more Drowned before reaching a lower level. In this room, there are multiple nooses hanging from the ceiling and a wooden chair in the middle, all bloodied up, showing signs of torture. We find a cassette tape on the table, but we need a VHS to play it, which means going back up to the apartments to find one. We eventually find one in none other than the serial killer's apartment. Playing the tape, we see what happened in the basement. The killer was filming himself torturing someone before chopping their heads off. The camera cuts to a view of the body with 4 digits written on it in blood. These are the codes for the elevator. Going back there and putting the codes in, Simon takes the elevator further below. Reaching an area that looks almost identical to the building we're at, except it's all covered in blood and metal bars are blocking every path. This part of the game reminds me a lot of the Other World from Silent Hill. The Other World, also known as the Other Side or the Nightmare World, is a nightmarish realm that manifests at the border where reality and unreality intersect. A place both close and distant, shaped by the minds and psyches of those within it, transforming familiar environments into grotesque, horrifying versions of themselves. Blood, rust, and decayed elements pervade these spaces. Similarly, this area in the game feels like a dark reflection of the apartment. The once familiar building is now a nightmarish landscape, covered in blood, rust, and obstructive metal bars, creating a sense of dread. It's almost like it's visualizing the true nature of the building, transforming it from normalcy to this twisted, oppressive version that mirrors the unsettling nature of the dark and disturbing events that were taking place here. While going down from level to level and going even lower, we finally reach the bottom level, a level made up of long hallways. At the end, we find a door, but something else is waiting for us on the other side.
Okay.
This is the first boss fight in Cry of Fear. Having accidentally entered the lair of the Sower, a tall, lengthy, chainsaw-wielding creature with nails protruding from all over its body. But this enemy isn't as difficult as it looks. All we have to do is keep moving backwards, deal as much damage to it as possible to cause it to fall down, where we can then reach its weak spot on its back. After dealing enough damage, the Sower stops and chops its own head off with his chainsaw. Due to the intensity of the whole thing, Simon throws up and passes out. The game cuts into a black and white cutscene of someone's apartment, before cutting back to Simon again, passed out somewhere else.
Did I pass out? Huh? Who's that?
Relax. I am not one of them.
Who are you then?
I'm nobody.
What?
You shouldn't be here. It's very dangerous.
Wait. Why are you wearing a gas mask?
I used to wear something until I lit back up and turned into one of them. I can't trust you. I don't know if you're real. Just leave me alone.
This is the first time that Simon has come face to face with another somewhat normal human being since the start of the game. A gas mask wearing stranger that the game only identifies as the Doctor. When asked why he's wearing a gas mask, he hints to Simon that it's to keep him from turning into one of them. Then he says that he can't trust us because he doesn't even know if we're real before leaving. How strange. This entire interaction is very cryptic and creates even more questions for us than answers. Could it really be something in the air that's causing all this? The reason why there's all these monsters and creatures running around? If that's the case, then why were we not affected? Why haven't we turned into one of them, like the Doctor said? Anywho, we leave through the door, emerging in a hallway where we encounter a new form of enemy, the Crouched, a deformed version of the Slower, crawling on all fours backwards. We eventually make it out of this basement, coming back out on top into a back alley.
Not bad.
It's raining now.
Oh, sorry, man.
We get ambushed
Sorry,
by
my
some
brother.
more crouchers,
No, you're good.
and we eventually find a magazine on the floor. Ripped magazine article. Most of it is too dirty to make out. It seems to be an article about depression. Sounds familiar. Don't delay. Call 543-214 today. The game prompts us to use our phone and dial for this depression helpline.
talking about? I need help, please!
5, 0, 4, 7.
God damn it! Help me!
The voice on the other end talks in cryptic ways and then gives us a number, 5247. It just so happens that the door right in front of us has a keypad. This number that we just called is completely different from the two numbers that were texting us at the start. But it's another case of an unknown messenger guiding us to find our way through our phone. Could it be that all three different numbers are all coming from this unknown voice? Entering the number on the keypad, we unlock the door. Reaching another basement. We find another manhole that we can go down to reach the sewers. Here we have to find a new enemy called the Sumo. They're similar to the Slowers, except they mainly attack using their tongues, which shoot out. These enemies come tied up in barbed wire, but they can also break out of their bondage and attack you with their arms. We make it through the sewers, breaking through a drain. We find another police car. This one has crashed into the canal. A police radio can be heard inside. Going deeper into the sewers, we eventually get into an area that's still under construction. After fighting some more enemies, we
Okay, fuck it, I'm
eventually
gonna go to
come
sleep, bro.
across this gruesome
Oh,
sight.
bruh.
It's a man.
I'm
At
gonna go
least
to sleep.
It's what remains. of
Bruh.
him.
Good
Alright.
night, brother.
Good night, brother.
Have a good one.
Bye now.
Bye.